Good morning, everyone, especially the online participants. Thank you so much for coming out today. We are the presenters has requested that we just hold on from beginning just for like about 5 minutes to get more persons coming in person. Well, more people coming in person. Okay, so we should begin in 5 more minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for accommodating us with the time. So good morning again, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's session on Cadastral Management Information System. It's themed around modernizing the cadastral processes. We are very pleased to have you all joining us in person and online for this important and practical session. Today's session is intended to provide that practical exposure with a clear focus on how the CMIS supports access to cadastral information and improves efficiency and strengthens our digital services. This is a hands-on and interactive session, so those attending in person, I would want to encourage you to have your laptops ready, of course, follow on as much as possible, and ask as many questions as possible. It is beneficial to us all. For our online participants who's using Zoom, I would request that you do the same. We're also welcome to ask questions through raising your hand on the online platform. And at an appropriate time, we'll grant you permission to be unmuted, to unmute your microphone, or you could simply just post the text. So a few quick notes. The session is being recorded. Writing materials are provided here for everyone in person. Refreshments will be available at 10:30, and lunch would be available at 1:00. So we are pleased to have Dr. Earl Edwards here with us, Ms. Carleen Boodoo, who is our presenters, who would guide us throughout the session. And without any further delay, let me invite our Director of Surveys who could get this thing going. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are hearing me. So, thank you. Just a few words to say thank you for coming, and to say Eid Mubarak to our fellow Muslim colleagues, and to ask that we seek God's blessings this morning. This is my prayer, that we are guided this morning to learn and to listen, and we will listen. So God, please bless all who are here in person today and who are online, and help us to get through this morning. So that's my prayer. Thank you, God. I have just a few words to tell you all today. So this session is the culmination of our phase 1 development, which we would have introduced to you guys last year. Carleen and Jelano did a presentation of our proposed plans then, while it was a work in progress. So we are pleased to announce that we've completed phase 1, and we are in discussions with our collaborators at the university to enter into phase 2. I am very excited about this platform. It has improved a lot on what we have had in the past, and I think you all will have a much better user experience. When we first envisioned these improvements, the genesis was because we lost a lot of functionality in our existing system, and we had to try to get back those functionalities. But we also wanted to improve on the things that we were working with. And that was in 2023. So it's 2026 now, and every day we turn on our laptop, you turn on your phone, you're seeing how artificial intelligence is creeping into every single aspect of your virtual life. So for phase 2, while we have proceeded with what we proposed way back in 2023, we're trying to squeeze in some of our observations of the improvements. But look out for phase 3. It may be it may be different, and it may be more interactive, and it may be even scarier. Right? So there was a lot of hard work put into creating that needs list, a lot of hard work working with the developers, a lot of back and forth, a lot of things that weren't working while we were implementing it. We get plenty buff from the developers, but we take away buff, and this is what it is. I just want to say thank you to the University of the West Indies and Dr. Edwards and his team. Because of their efforts, and the team of Roland and Carleen and Jelano and every single member of staff of the Surveys and Mapping Division that participated in giving their feedback, in telling us what works and what does not work, they created this thing that we have to present today. And I hope you all continue to participate, because we, at least I am always listening to hear what we can do better, what we're doing wrong, and how. Don't come with me, just come to me with just the problem. Come to me with a suggestion as to how to improve it, and we'll work together to try to make it better for everyone. So, that's my brief greetings. There's on the agenda 5 minutes for my registrar secretary, who has gracefully declined. I don't know if he's changed his mind. He's coming.
Good morning, Chairman, Land Survey Board, Dr. Edwards, the team, members, colleagues here. I believe we are all happy here to be present to see this new development. It's going to take us from the paper submissions to now digital submissions. Yes, the rules, land surveyors' rules for the plan preparation, it's still a work in progress that should be completed shortly by the board. And with those rules coming in, the implementation of phase 2 and probably phase 3 of this CMIS would be completed. So I'm sure all of you are looking forward to this new platform for the plan submission. All right, so this morning proceedings, Colleen, I'll ask you to take chair. Sure, thanks.
So, I'll wait for our Master of Ceremonies to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Ms. Naimul Ramdas. So as we proceed today, we're going straight into it where I want to introduce the doctor, Mr. Earl Edwards, who will be presenting on building Trinidad and Tobago's national spatial data infrastructure, the role of the land surveyor, and the new CMS. Yeah.
Carlene, if I could find your mouse. You're looking for mouse pointer. Okay. Probably better this way. Where it is. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Director of Surveys, Ms. Boudou, Project Manager, should I call you that, for CMIS. As I said, my name is Earl Edwards. I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. Permit me briefly to acknowledge my colleague, Cherise Griffith-Charles. How is retirement going? I'll be with you shortly. So yes. So this morning, my presentation is going to be building Trinidad and Tobago's national spatial data infrastructure, right? We're looking at the role of the surveyor and also the role of the new CMIS, right? While Carlene would be showing you guys or taking you guys through the whole operation of the system, I thought it best to sort of position this whole CMIS in the context of where Trinidad and Tobago is going shortly. And that is the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, right? The director and her team had engaged ECLAC for assistance in putting together a roadmap for where this NSDI is going to go. That was supported The report was presented, and I think it was taken to cabinet, and I think the director would, so I wouldn't want to, she'll speak more about that, right, of what came out of all of that. So what we're going to do is, following this brief agenda, we want to look at, first of all, to give a sense of what is spatial data infrastructure, just some little concepts. It's not going to be long. And then we'll talk a little bit about the role of the surveyor. Again, all these are very short because we want to give you enough time to immerse yourself into the new product. And then we're going to look at the cadastral management information system. A brief talk about what was envisioned, where we are now, and where we plan to go, right? And then we want to talk a little bit about the future and opportunities. And inside there, we briefly mention, and I don't want the director to get excited. This is, we are foremost a research institution, and we are looking at integrating artificial intelligence into a future version of the CMIS, and we have just started testing that, and we'll show you some outcomes of what that looks like. How many persons have actually used the new CMIS or at least logged into the new CMIS already? 3 people. And I also acknowledge the persons who are online at the moment. Probably they could raise their hands as well, right? Well, then you'll be in for probably a treat, right, Colleen? A couple of years ago, this article was presented in the Jamaica Observer. It spoke about the NHT, National Housing Trust, which is the equivalent of HDC here, spending something like $400 million for useless lands. In other words, they purchased some parcels of land, and the parcels of land could not do what they wanted to do, right? I know you might be saying to yourself, well, oh, Earl, that's Jamaican dollars, so. I'm not going to fall into the trap like other prime ministers in the territory who will blast in other people's currency. But just know that then it was 10 to 1 to the Trinidad dollar, right? So that's 40 million TT dollars. Just imagine, if you had 40 million TT dollars, what would you do now, right? Well, surely you wouldn't be here on a Sunday morning listening to me, right? Probably on a yacht sailing somewhere, right? But just think about it. How much improvement can we do to the current state of the CMIS at the moment, given that, right? You might be also thinking to yourself that, sorry, that's Jamaica. Those things don't happen in Trinidad and Tobago, right? True? We don't waste money here, do we? This article, and most of you guys must have heard about this, right? The Las Alturas, never occupied, and all the units had to be demolished because it was on land that was not suitable for the construction of such units, right? Starting out somewhere at $100 million, and by the time you put in all the various inquiries that's supposed to go into that, then that boils up a bit, right? This is not Jamaican dollars now, this is Trinidad and Tobago dollars. And we're talking about in excess of something like $200 and something million, right? How many CMISs we could build with that, right? So the whole idea here is that we have limited resources. And can we find a way in which we can manage these limited resources, in which we can make more informed decisions, right? We've always said that knowledge of location accounts for nearly 80% of the decisions we make. And as surveyors, I mean, you're like the principal persons for collecting information which we're going to be using for informed decisions, right? So not having at all access to geospatial information to make informed decisions can be extremely costly, right? For any organization, not just government, right? So it therefore makes sense that we find some way in which we could support decision making that will rely on location or spatial context. And in that regard, we use something called a geospatial information infrastructure. Some people refer to it as an NSDI, or National Spatial Data Infrastructure. However, that's all well and good, using the technology. But we have major challenges. And one of those is actually being able to get access to good, consistent geospatial information, or something we refer to as authoritative data, right? So we see that national spatial data infrastructures are becoming known as a necessary infrastructure. It's a necessary tool. It's a necessary framework. However we want to phrase it, right? For providing access to authoritative geospatial information products, right? While that may be good and well, I think that you may be asking yourself the question, well, what exactly is an NSDI? Is there anybody who's hearing the term NSDI for the first time, National Spatial Data Infrastructure? No? So everybody familiar with NSDIs and what it can do? Well, I guess half my work here is done then. So what then is a National Spatial Data Infrastructure? Briefly said, it's a coordinating framework for technology, policy, standards, and people that enable the collection, management, and sharing and use of geospatial data across a nation or across organizations, right? It's built on 4 pillars: policies and standards, technology and platforms, data sets, and people. Those 4 things, right? So the whole idea of implementing an NSDI, and this is driven by government, well, in this case, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, right? They want to make sure they put in some sort of structure for how we are going to manage geospatial data, right? Whether that is data sharing policies, pricing policies, whether those be standards, whether it's ISO or whatever, of how we're supposed to present that, right? And within the surveying community, within the surveying profession, you have methods already in which you use to standardize the way you work. Some of them you may refer to as the rules governing how you prepare a survey plan for submission, right? And the technology that we're going to be using, right? Most of these NSDIs come out of using GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, as the framework, right? So that's normally the starting point. And then we have these other information technologies that we also use, and the CMIS being one of those, yeah? Where data is concerned, there are something that we refer to as the fundamental data sets. There are about 12 or 14 of them, depending on which framework you look at. And again, it is the duty of the land surveyor to be able to contribute to preparing these sort of data sets that are required to be used, right? And then there is the people. Obviously, you, the surveyors, at the forefront, and then you have the decision makers. You have government, you have users, you have other people who would be doing creation and stuff like that, right? For the purpose of the NSDI for Trinidad, one of the first things that was required is actually being able to come up with some sort of governance structure, right? Up where you have the policies, the standards. How do we govern such a thing, given that there are so many different requirements, so many different needs for geospatial data, right? And this is one of the things that we came up with, right? Being able to see exactly how that structure is going to work, yeah? So at the forefront or at the top, you have here cabinet. Then you have the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Land and Legal Affairs, which is going to actually drive the whole of this. Then you have the other partners. You have the Tobago House of Assembly, You have the committees of permanent secretaries. You also have shareholders, stakeholders, and then you have the driving force, the actual Geospatial Information Management Center, right? But in the middle, at the heart of all of that, is the NSDI Council, which is going to, well, at least at the outset, comprise of all the heads of all the various divisions and departments against over government, right? And then, obviously, to do the actual work, you're going to need people, and they are broken out into these various committees, which range from fundamental data sets all the way over to GIS applications, right? All of these being used as a mechanism for ensuring that this structure we want to put in place is actually going to be well thought out, well planned, and actually useful for generating spatial data for informed decision making, right? The other pillar that we looked at was technology and platforms, right? We are at an era, and they haven't officially said it yet because with the industrial revolutions, everybody talk about being up to the fourth industrial revolutions, where we have computer systems being connected to the internet and be able to send communications, right? But then you transition all of that into what we're now looking at as the fifth or sixth industrial revolution, where you have systems are able to create other systems, in other words, give birth to systems. And those systems are able to communicate with one another without any human intervention whatsoever, the thing that we're calling AI and large language models now, right? So looking at this particular architecture, which we would refer to it as, we have the various government ministries, which we have their networks, their various networks. So all these circles here refers to the local area networks. All the orange refers to the database that is going to be stored. And the big circle, the government wide area network, is obviously iGovTT, controlled, managed, and all the organizations are connected to that. Everyone is working, they're creating their content, they have responsibility for whatever content they are creating, right? Now you could quickly realize that the Surveys and Mapping Division has responsibility for almost most of the fundamental data sets, yeah? And we look at those very shortly. But the whole idea, remember, the National Spatial Data Infrastructure is meant to be able to provide a mechanism for sharing good quality authoritative data, right? And what is the entity responsible for ensuring that we have good quality data? Nobody want to say? Surveys and mapping? I thought you guys were going to say we the surveyors. Right? Surveys and mapping register, they manage, they oversee, but we as surveyors are the ones who are collecting this information. And if their stamp of approval is going to go on it, yes, the surveys and mapping tend to, from time to time, look over, send back your plans to you, and some of you may, I'm just talking out the top of my head, right? I'm not saying what the director does, and from my experience in Jamaica, and you do not agree with the comments and you want to argue out why it must be the way it is. But the rules are there, the standards are there for a purpose, right? And in collecting that information, there are various ways in which we could get that data, the sources of geospatial data, those fundamental data sets, those data sets that we need to drive the CMIS, right? The CMIS, as wonderful as an application that it might be, it's like buying a Ferrari, right? And you don't have the right octane to put inside. All the gas stations have a diesel, right? So you have this wonderful thing you could just park in your driveway and wash it down every Sunday morning, right? We want to be able to have the gas, the fuel that is going to drive the CMIS, and that comes through data that is being collected by us as surveyors, right? Traditionally, we looked to photogrammetry. That is now evolving using unmanned, well, in the United Nations being correct, uncrewed aerial vehicles, which is the new gender-neutral term that is being used now, right? And that information, right, that we're going to be and using, well, we wouldn't say replaces photogrammetry, but complements photogrammetry, because we still have a challenge covering very large areas with drones, right? On this campus, we researching, part of my research has to do with the use of, in the early days, back in 2016 when we started. Since 2016, we have been flying the campus every year to collect information, to monitor it, to see how these low-cost devices, these $1,500 drones that you could buy at Best Buy or one of those, could be used to supplement or augment geospatial information, right? In the last 3 years, we were sort of modified our term from low cost, because the drones don't normally cost $1,500 anymore, right, to affordable, because they now cost $6,000 US, right? Those are the ones that could really do mapping. And we have been studying those specific ones, like the DJI Mavic 3E, right, over the campus. We have 35 control points well distributed over the campus. We fly it once every year, and we've been comparing this information, as I said, since 2016, right? With those affordable drones like the 3E, we could now connect to the VRS with the drone, fly the drone without using a single ground control point, leading us to accuracies of better than 10 centimeters, right? It's more than what we require for GIS, but just think about it. In the future, we'd be looking at using AI to extract definitive boundaries out of higher resolution drone imagery, right? It's something that we're already planning for, right? And then we have the traditional total station and prisms and the GNSS, well, with remote sensing and stuff like that, right? However, government is still driven by paper. I really don't know if our laws are advanced enough for us to start to accept a lot of digital stuff. I remember we were doing one project and we were told we can't issue digital receipts because the law says, right? And every corner you turn, you always hear the law says, right? So there is a challenge that we need to overcome if we're going to use technology a lot in what we're doing. But nonetheless, government is still paper-driven, right? And while we may have the drones and we have the total stations and whatever, we're still faced with situations like these, right? I wouldn't say which organization this is. Most of it is not Trinidad anyway, right? But some of these, if you're talking about looking, if you're dealing with a deed, they say you have to go back. How far back you have to go? 30 years? How much? 30 years? 20, 30? After you reach 25 years and you're going on to the 26th year, you meet documents that look like this one. If you touch it, it disintegrates, right? What do you do with something like that? How do you scan? How do you create digital products from stuff like that? And those do exist within the ministries, right? You have some organizations who, instead of, for whatever reason, instead of hanging the plans on racks, they tend to fold them and put them in file jackets. So you tend to get these. If the scale is 1 in 1,000, that's 1 millimeter is equal to what, 1 meter? And if you get some warping or creasing for 3 millimeters, that's what? 3 meters? You start to progress that forward, and by the time you think you're scanning, digitizing, and you're getting good overlay, right? By the time we start to overlay that, no matter how good our base map is, we end up with issues, challenges, difficulties, right? So data is still a problem. The government speaks about digitalization. We used to talk about digitizing, right? if we're going to use these modern systems, we need legacy data to make decisions. And someday in the future, somebody is going to figure out a way to use AI to be able to use legacy data and be able to, if the data, like the plans that did not have any coordinates, and find a way to use AI to be able to add coordinate values to these plans that never had values before, to sort of improve the system, right? Nonetheless, to drive the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, remember, the SDI is geared towards connecting people with data, right? That's all it does. But not just any data, not this, right? Good, authoritative spatial data. And as surveyors, this is what we need to contribute towards, right? We need to contribute towards these fundamental data sets, these 12 data sets that drive. This is the fuel that drives no matter what system we are creating, right? And you notice what is the first data set that, and I'm not sure that's it, I don't think it was by accident though. What is the first data set that is listed here? Your job, right? You play a very critical role in being able to get that. So we need to have things like cadastral parcels, buildings, addresses, streets or roads, administrative boundaries. And for you, your administrative boundaries are like what? County, ward, community, right? Boroughs, boroughs, right? And elevation, auto images, driven heavily, as I said before, with aircrafts. Today, I'm not sure how many persons have seen, you guys have seen those drone light shows where you have these swarms of drones up and they're creating these, yeah? We have been looking at, thank you. We have been looking at the same concept, using swarms, the swarm concept from bees and whatever, to be able to, remember how much we said the drone had cost, $6,000? A good high-end drone is like what, 30,000 US dollars? I could get 5 at 6,000, right? And I could fly all 5 synchronized, right? If one drone covers 1 square kilometer in 15 minutes, then if I have 5 of them flying, I'm covering an area of 5 square kilometers as I travel. We experiment with this concept already, and there's good promise, right? Just think about it. Drone manufacturers now are integrating AI into their drones, right? We don't have to work out flying height and separation. All we need to do is put the parameters into the flight controller, and it's a single operator that is controlling the swarm, right? As the swarm go forward, it's just mapping as we go forward, right? So we used to have where, what, every 5 years, every what, 10 years, Director? I take that because the last flight was in 2014, right? We're now what, 12 years, Director? Getting funding to be able to do that. Some people say, okay, let's mix it with what, satellite imagery? And use the drones to do places that have been developed. So HDC put in a housing scheme, it's not in the system, we could do that, right? But nonetheless, we still have to do a complete flight, right? The VRS core system, rivers and lakes for riparian type ownership, and then we have land use, land cover, right? Because if you're doing subdivision, obviously the land use type impacts the rules governing how you subdivide, okay? And then, what would we have here? We have the data. From data, we get information. And up to 5 years ago, that's where everybody stopped, all database analysts or whatever. We process the data, and we get information. Today, that's not enough. They say data is the new oil, and it's those who could mine it. If you look, right, you notice that countries that actually have oil are not the ones that make money, right? It's the people who come in and mine the oil. that actually make the money. They pay you the taxes, right? Whatever that is. And they go away with the bigger portion, right? He who mines gets the benefit, right? So what we want to do is to be able to, information is all well and good, but we want to use the data to have an understanding. Some people say insights. Use the data to have insights. As surveyors, I know for a long time, we have so focused and we have our bills to pay and we are so focused on our metal detector and detecting the lick up iron pegs next to the hole and we driving in our pegs and stuff like that, right? Other persons are thinking about how do I get additional revenue streams out of these new technologies to expand my business and bring in, and while at the same time contributing, right? So looking at understanding, looking at improvement, looking at better decision making, right? So that's National Spatial Data Infrastructure, a framework which we're going to be using along with data we collect as surveyors to be able to allow persons access to it using ICT infrastructure and be able to do what? Make informed decisions, right? So in terms of NSDI, where are we now? Where are we now? Well, we need to establish the NSDI Council, right? We need to have the surveys and mapping division be able to manage those main fundamental data sets, such as the cadastral, the topographic, all of those, right? All of that being done under this new ministry. Yeah? The cadastral parcels that are being digitized, we have them going, but unfortunately, that's not going at a rate that will help us to get to full coverage, right? And we need to think about other ways in which we are going to do that, right? As it stands right now, we estimate something like what, 600,000 parcels or properties, and of that, we have only processed something like 200,000, so we have gone like 1/3 or nearly just above 30%, right? So how could we fast track this thing so that we could get this cadastral layer? The cadastral layer is important for the NSDI. How do we go about doing something like that, right? Well, I was leaving this later on, but I'll probably ask it right now, right? How many persons in the room are willing to, when you submit your plan, to send an attachment of the CAD drawing for that plan? Yeah? That's a start. What happened to my well, it depends. Okay, there is condition, right? One of the things that we don't want is you to take your nice polished plan and submit it. That is not, right, Director? That is not the intention. The intention is just to extract the parcel, the boundary, just that CAD outline, and send that, right? They don't need the plan, because remember, you already gave them the plan. They already have it scanned, right? The what? Yeah, but no, just the outline, right? And we revisit that again shortly, right? One of the other things, too, that they've been struggling with is an agreed unique parcel ID. We use one. It's generic TD, TB. If in Tobago is TD, in Trinidadian TB. But how many surveyors actually, this is question and answer time. How many surveyors actually use the UPIN in execution of any of their duties? TD, TB. You don't search Landfolio, you don't search the online, you don't, no. Everybody looking at me blank like parcel ID, unique identifier. What on earth is that, right? yeah, so the reason I'm stressing it is because it is very critical for connectivity with most of the stakeholders. First being the Registrar General, right? You know that when we're talking about, well, but you know this better than I, right? That when you're talking about the whole thing about managing cadastral information, you have the cadastre and the parcel outlines, the extents of the rights in land, managed by the surveys and mapping, which are located at Frederick Street, right? And then you have the ownership information, rights and responsibilities and all of those, which is in a book that is located where? Port of Spain, Richmond and Queen, or something like that, right? So geographically disparate locations, right? And then we're talking about how then do we pin them together, right? There's a case that just went to the Privy Council. It was in the newspapers just last week or week before, I think, where the law lords are about to rule on two people. Well, one guy bought a property, and then someone else turned up with a deed for that property. So we have two deeds for the property. And and you guys know the law better than me, right? First in time, right? So the one who didn't had it before was first in time. And these ones who bought the property, I don't know if they didn't register it on time or what. So the law lords have this sort of case the way their thing, right? And it's a practice we have, which is a little different from Jamaica, whereby we could do deeds, we could describe it, bounded on the north, south, east, west, whatever, right? But we don't attach some sort of graphic as to where the thing is located, right? Unless it's probably RP or one of those things, right? So the thing is that we need a better way in which we're going to manage these things. And if we are in two different locations, although in the same ministry now, how do we then make that connection? Thinking GIS, thinking NSDI, how do we then make that connection, right? So that segues into our role as surveyors, right? I alluded to some of them, right? First and foremost, you are data creators, right? It would be a little, well, let me don't say that. We should not only be focused on cadastral surveying, although I think that is what pays our bills and stuff like that. But if we're going to transition into this new realm, this realm where we're looking at using ICT to be able to drive most of these, right? Then we were looking at the full spectrum of the fundamental data sets, not only generating additional revenue streams, but being able to contribute, right? So every survey plan that we submit feeds into the National Cadastral Record, right? And we are the engine for producing that. We are guardians of quality, we enforce standards, and we are bridge builders, right? Coming back to that same thing we talk about with the UPIN, yeah? So what does this mean for our practice? It means that we have the tools that we are going to use. Question time again. How many persons actually use the VRS or the cores to put controls for their surveys? I think the right people to ask the question are right here, right? Well, I mean, we at the UWI must be the luckiest person alive, right? What's happening here? I've lost my screen. No? Yes, so we must be the luckiest persons alive because every time we go out and connect to the VRS, we connect, right? There's only one occasion I know that we probably off board. But your point is well taken because it is one of those things that is required, right, Director? To be able to, sorry to put you in that position, but it just came out. But yeah, the whole idea that the survey controls form the basis, like the skeleton on which we're going to put all our other layers, right? And if we're going to be talking about having these things done, then I think that's one of the things that we would need as well, right? Submitting plans with coordinates, and them are coordinate plans, and the coordinates are correct, right? I'm not sure, you guys probably experience it using other surveyors' data, but I don't know. I hope it's in the minority. But we have seen coordinates where when you try to plot them in the datum that is listed on the plan. So they said it's WGS84 UTM 20N, right? Or, well, you guys say P, right? And when you plot it, you're like 300 meters away from where you're supposed to be, right? Obviously, the system must have some way of recording those sort of errors, right? Adaptation of the pin and enhancing the digital workflows, which is what the CMIS is going to do. Okay, changing gears now to the CMIS. I don't have a lot to say about this because I know Carlene is going to take you guys through the full spectrum of how that works. But it has well, first and foremost, it's built on the most modern of technologies, right? We're using something called Docker. It's a containerized system. So instead of just using the software installed in your Windows environment, because of all the breaches and hacks and whatever has been going on, right? What we did is to create what we call an isolated or playground in the operating system called a container, and the system is built within that container. If anything happens, all we do is just throw away the container and spin up a new container and just replace the whole application and go along, right? And what it does for us is allow us to be able to make updates and changes on the fly, and the director had a lot of those, right? Next, we have the digital parcel index. That's the plan that we want, and this is why I'm recommending strongly that you guys consider submitting those parcel outlines, right? Why I'm asking? Because when you submit the plan, what does the surveys and mapping do? They take that paper plan, they scan it, they georeference it, introducing errors. They have to digitize that over again. That's the same digital outline you guys have in your organization, right? And then before they could even get to it, right? So it's no surprise that we only reached 30%, right? If we need to really jumpstart this thing, or if we need to, as we envision by phase 4, right, to be able to allow the system to automatically take the parcel and ingest it itself into the index, right? So you end up having with 1 day, and not now, director, right? That's 1 day, right? Looking at the future, right? Whereby the surveyor submits the plan online, and without human intervention, it comes to a conclusion at the end, all within 15 minutes, right? Would that be great for you guys? No response? No, because, no, you guys like, oh, we're taking away from your enjoyment in the field. What are you talking about? So what would I do for the next 3 days, right? Quality control, and another big one at the bottom here is the RGD linkage. Remember we talked about you have the parcels at Frederick Street, you have the ownership information in Port of Spain, well, on the other side of Port of Spain, and then how do we tie these things together, right? Can I go into a system, click on it, see the parcel, click on the parcel, and be able to get access to the deed that's related to that parcel, right? And can I, while clicking on that parcel, go back on my own 30 years, sitting in the comfort of my office, looking at the thing to be able to see where that is, right? So the Cadastral Management Information System, we envisage conducting it over 3 phases. And as you could see here, phase 1, as the director said, was completed. There's a core, there is a public map, there is user-friendly, there is automatic creation of plan references, enabling external users to be able to view documents, be able to conduct simple user-friendly searches, more timely approaches to entering parcel information. So all those requirements have been met, right? And more, right? The reason why is because we are now negotiating phase 2, right? This was the old phase 2, but because of the lessons learned and the insights from the way we did this technology, right? The surveys and mapping have some other urgent needs. So this is going to be revisited, and I think with a new set of requirements that is more in keeping with the advancement of phase 1 before we get on to phase 3, right? And there, phase 3, I think it has to do with what we refer to as monetizing the resources of the organization, right? And I'm sure the director would have some more to say to you guys on how much do you guys pay at the moment to have one of your plans registered, checked and registered? What? Oh, it's paid in your taxes. Well, that's a new paradigm. I wish I could say that. If you were able to get your plan processed at a faster rate through the electronic system, would you be willing to pay for the service? That is, I have to think about it. Hey, the money's not coming to me, you know. I'm not the one getting the money, right? The money goes to improving the service, right? Now, suggested rules for update, right? And don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger, okay? I am not the one, right? But it helps to enhance what it is that we're doing, right? Director, all of these have been crossed off already. First of all, one of the issues that we have with that same issue about the coordinates and being 300, let's eliminate that. Let's start to see that out. Let's use the geocentric modern systems of GPS, GNS, and UAV, etc., right? How do you guys feel about, are we with Naparima? Oh boy, quiet. You don't have to do the work, you know. All you need to do is code your system. The surveys and mapping will just tell you what parameters you put in here, and it's like, same operation. Again, let's try this one more time. Show of hands. All those who willing to. Which session was that? Director, which?
We
Yeah.
haven't changed the rules. Because all our rules talk about NAPRIMA coordinates.
What's the process for changing a rule? One rule.
Well, then the board will have to come into play. And
So the board
decide.
convenes,
Yeah.
they discuss, and then they do what? They reach out to the community and say, this is what we are planning. Do you all agree? Or the board just, does the director have the authority, like in another jurisdiction that I was in, to actually from time to time make rules governing the operation of the surveys and mapping division?
That line resides with the board.
So, okay,
board.
so it's not the director, it's the board.
Yeah.
So does the board have the authority to make rules from time to time to enhance and update the way we practice? Always. Yeah, so what's stopping us from moving from Naparima? All right, next.
That's
The
just what the board could change the way we present our data. But I'm looking at all our legacy data being on NAPRIMA.
Yeah.
And they might want to merge the two. So there must be some sort of linkage for that to happen.
Yeah, so the systems like the GIS systems that they're using now, it's seamless, right? On the fly. You're jumping from one to the next on the fly, right? Not much. And the third one was what? So the survey plans that you guys said that we already agreed to, right? So how does all of this work? The whole idea is we have the NSD. It's a portal. It's visible. We could go online. We could log in. You all have been using some of the applications that the university have created. I think one is called Trinidad Cadastral. One is called Tobago Cadastral, right? Where are we now? We are in what, March? Yeah? So starting in April, we'll be turning off most of those services and transitioning over to the new services that's being offered by the surveys and mapping. So we have Cadastral CMIS, we have land registry, we have users that include the public, lawyers, real estate, and stuff like that, right? And as we saw before, operating this way, whereby you have down on this side here, the cloud, and everybody able to log into the cloud. You have been doing this for the last, how long our services have been up? 3 years? Yeah? Plugging into the cloud, you don't even know that you're doing that, right? And the CMIS is going to work the same way, seamless. Anyway, the CMIS is designed for desktop, right? While it gives some functionality using mobile phones, it's not designed for that, like laptop, desktop, tablets, right? So the future, let me just wind down. Future developments, as it stands right now, where are we? Near term. Near term means what? Today? Tomorrow. Near term, right? So we have two items here, near term. Cloud-based CMIS portal, that's available now. Well, no, a month ago. We have the public map viewer, near term, that has been available a month ago, right? So all those near-term items are available for use by the surveying community, right? Integrated multi-agency interoperability, I think that was in phase 3. Director, you moved it to phase 2. Yeah? And then the other two, AI automation. That's where we're as I said before, we're foremost a research institution, right? So that AI is what we're actually focused on at the moment, and how we could today integrate some AI tools into the CMIS, right? So this is the cloud base. Carleen will take you guys through it. This has a map in it. This is the public viewer. It's a standalone application, right, that works independent of. It uses the same data set, but it is independent of the CMIS, right? 3D Cadastral, yeah? We've been looking into this for nearly 3 to 4 years now. My colleague, Shirish Griffith-Charles, have been also looking at 3D Cadastral. I'm sure that the director is now good now that she has a lot of time on her hands and be able to rope her in. Okay, Ainsley. Okay. But as it pertains, you don't see it clearly here, but this is actually the geomatics building over there, and it's actually 2 floors that you're actually seeing, right? The ability to be able to go. Just assume that this was an apartment building and those rooms are apartments and whatever. The ability to be able to look at this in 3 dimensions, right? All we have been doing so far is looking at our 2D plans as a flat 2D surface, right? And what do? When we digitize them, what we do? Just stack one on top of the other, yeah? Why can't we just flip it on its side and just look at it and just go to a particular apartment in a building and see it, right? The other thing now, AI automation, and this is where we've been doing this. This is an actual example of automatically stenciling the plan, right? So if it's integrated, what the system does is, sorry, director, this is not in phase 2, right? So what the system is going to do is once it's being pushed forward, it takes I think The registry supervisor is the one who assigns plan references, right? Once it's assigned, it's automatically stenciled and move on to the GIS unit, right? This is how the workflow is intended to work. Or it could be manually managed as well, right? Next, AI automation. I think is when we were doing this, I think it was Giuliano who had mentioned this, that for those of you who haven't used the system before, you could take your plan, scan it, what digital format, and you drive it through the system, right? And you look at your portal, which Carlin is going to show you all just now, and it shows and tracks where the plan is at different stages as it walks through the system, right? At the outset, although that how everything is fast after this, some people were talking about the fact that the plan could load easily on the left-hand side, right? The first question was, so if the plan could load, they all can't just make the software just extract all the information, and why do we have to type it in, right? So now, with this particular AI test, we load the plan into the screen and tell it to extract. It uses AI large language model, so we have to get an API out to the running on the server, because we do have the resources to run this here, and we're going to look at ways in which we could do it. And it extracts all, in this case we have what, 26 attributes, right? And it extracts everything and put them in their correct place. No intelligence, well, they said no intelligence, lots of intelligence required, right? Because we have to train it, we have trained it on about 6, 7, 8 plans. They all must look different, large plans, small plans, whatever, right? There's still some issues with it that we will work towards having those resolved, right? But the whole idea is that as we suspected, the integration of AI and automation into the CMIS looks very promising for a phase 3, right? Anybody want to try this? Which one? 1993, 112.
All right, sorry.
Yeah. So what we could do is that we could give you guys the, this runs on our server just across the street here. And we could actually open this director to the community for them to play around with it and give us some feedback, right? Here we have also AI automation that has to do with the extraction of building footprints, right? These models exist. This is an experiment somewhere in the United States. Using high resolution drone imagery, we did something similar over Train City, Sunrise Park, I think it was. And we got 70% extraction. The challenge there is that, well, you know, in Trinidad, we don't build our houses like the US where these models are being trained, right? Everything is cookie cutter and they just look alike. We tend to be very ambitious in the way we outline and design. So the AI, when you have this star shape and the AI is so confused that it doesn't even know what that is all about. So a little bit more training needs to be done with that. So what's the benefits? What's the benefit of using NSDI? First of all, as we saw, right? Save ourselves $40 million, right? So definitely saving money, providing decision support, saving time, increasing efficiency, faster land transactions, reduce disputes, generating revenue, building an information base, meaning we have parcels, we have buildings, we have roads, we have boundaries, we have everything as a base that persons could use, right? And the new CMIS, it actually allows you, you could upload any data you have once it is in shapefile, KML, CSV, or GPX, I think it is. You could upload it onto the base and be able to visualize it, right? And finally, you matter. Your roles matter, right? And the success of this NSDI depends on active participation, right? Because you're the one who is going to benefit, or one of the stakeholders who is going to benefit, right? And you could do that by embracing the digital workflows, encouraging your colleagues to use the CMIS submission, using the VRS, especially in cases where you have very large subdivisions. It will help the SMD a lot in being able to fast track, right? Submitting your digital plans, right? And become a champion for data quality. Yeah, check your work, check your coordinates and stuff like that, right? Thank you so much for your attention. Colleen was getting excited to go and demonstrate the software.
Okay.
Thank- I just have to. Yeah. I watched the whole presentation, and I am looking at. We are seeing only about the cadastral management. Everything was hinged on just cadastral surveys. But I suppose it's the director I'm asking now. Does it mean that you all don't have the hydrographic division again? Is it no longer under the Ministry of Legal Affairs and Surveys and Mapping?
Please don't think that. But that is something that we will be discussing for phase 3.
Because I'm concerned because there's a certain amount of boundary work for cadastral surveying in the whole environment of the marine environment, particularly where our national boundaries are concerned, and where we are giving out all those leases to people. So we should have some sort of.
You know, March, April is budget time in the public service. This is where you prepare your estimates for next year. Yeah. So we were preparing it, and it was raised as something that if we should start considering it in our preparations for next year's version of the CMIS. A component will be included, but we haven't discussed phase 3 with Dr. Edwards yet. But it was discussed as to how much of the marine cadastre we can include in our database, and then the workflows that would be necessary. Yeah, don't feel left out. Because I mean, it's marine cadastres. The 3D component hasn't even been considered in phase 2 and phase 3 yet. So I mean, if the artificial intelligences overtake us and they figure it out before we do, it might be something that you just say, hey, we want that, and you just and you pay for it. So are there any other questions? Are there questions online? Okay. Any other questions at this time? But we're scheduled for a break around 10:30. So if we need to have any burning questions answered, I don't know. Look, Roland looked like he have something to say. Well, one of the things we are proposing for next year's budget is the upgrade of the entire cores network. Hopefully, Trinidad and Tobago has money for us to do it. Hello? Hold on. The online people can't hear you.
To answer your question about the availability of the cores network, the system really doesn't go down. So anytime you can't connect, there's normally be a communication problem. And these days, floaters work very fast to bring it back up. So normally a communication problem with the ISP.
Thank you.
So Dr. Edwards did throw me under the bus a few times, right? But every single one of the issues he has raised are issues challenges that the division is working to overcome. But everything requires some sort of resource to allow us to achieve an acceptable, efficient operating organization and the service that you all are looking for. It's not that we have not thought about it or chose to ignore it. It is there in the universe waiting for the correct fairy to wave its wand and have it happen. With regard to the work that was done by the UN, this was in December last year, for the proposals of a National Spatial Data Infrastructure Council. Our last feedback was that it was tabled before Cabinet, and we have an unconfirmed Cabinet decision that it is being accepted. So we will wait to see what the confirmed Cabinet decision will look like. But of course, Dr. Edwards, this is not his first rodeo with the NSDI. This was done some 12 years ago. And I think they've got to this stage as well. So we're hoping that now it's in the hands of the surveyors it gets done. I don't know, it was not in the hands of the surveyors before. But as you can see, the NSDI is for us to be able to share what we produce with others. And we know that we share our data amongst ourselves. We are accustomed to calling up a colleague and asking, you work here? Tell me what you do. And most of our colleagues oblige, and you share information because that's the only way that you will survive or even get a result from where you're working. But it's not the same practice with the other agencies and other organizations that depend on our data. And we would like to get something back from them as well, more particularly the Registrar General's Department and even with the Commissioner of State Lands. So it is important that this NSDI starts working, and if we force it on others, say this is the only way that you're going to communicate with us. They depend on us more than we depend on them. We need to, and I think we can push it. So, Ricardo? Yeah.
Yes, we have two other questions, though.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's related to what you were just speaking about. It's coming from Mr. Doyle, Winston Doyle. What framework or mechanisms can be put in place to encourage surveyors to contribute data to an NSDI while ensuring they retain control over their intellectual property?
So, I think it is, we all assume, because we are the creators of our survey plans, if you're talking about cadastral survey plans and the data that you collect to produce those plans, we can probably look at our legislation and explicitly choose to insert some things to protect what is created by the surveyor and what is collected by the surveyor. I know I've been receiving reports from some persons who are trying to access information from the Town and Country Planning Division. And they are being told that the information is to be kept confidential because it was the creation of someone else. And I don't believe that their laws allow them to release it to any third party requesting it. So if it is that the laws are what needs to be looked at and to protect the surveyor's information. But on the other hand, I mean, somebody who died who has submitted an application in Town and Country, and I am coming later on and I have no clue as to what is in there, and I need to find out because my client is probably not even wasn't even the owner back then. What can our legislation do to support access like that? Discussions will need to be had. I don't know, Mr. Doyle, if that helps you at this time, but if you are willing to be part of that conversation or you have any suggestions as to how it can be done, we'd be all willing to hear what you think.
Okay, so I'll wait for another response from him if he has any. The other question is from Mr. Seymour Alfred. Will we be able to upload RPA plans for checking as well, and then upon preliminary approval, submit the paper-based plans?
That is the intention during our phase 2. So phase 1, and I'm probably letting out some of the goodies that Colleen is going to present, but phase 1, we have the ability for the submission of your plans for pre-checking for only the common law applications, and we will be moving into the Real Property Act transactions and survey order plan transactions for phase 2. I have questions here.
Right, so what I've noticed is that on Facebook, I'm actually seeing real estate agents advertising these websites for people to go on, for the public to go on and access the information. I mean, it's a big cost to implement such a system. Attorneys also have free access that we don't have access to their deeds.
Their days are numbered.
Sorry?
Their days are numbered.
Oh, the days are numbered. Okay, that's what I just wanted to find out.
But it also ties into his monetizing spiel, right? So
you said we are ready to accept OLO plans in phase 1. What are the limitations of including the RPA and the survey orders in that same type of process for checking?
well, it's more the developer side. And adding those rules into the the workflow and the processes to be worked out. So it is on the list for phase 2.
We are talking about some RP and old law plans. But we have had 3 pieces of legislation. What is the government intentions? Are they going to introduce those 3 pieces of legislation to replace the RPA and otherwise? And how would this system fit into it? You're talking about the adjudication package, where, with the registration of titles to land. Yeah. So when those 3 pieces of legislation were first prepared, the role of the Director of Surveys currently in terms of the creation of our parcel map and a database of all our surveys. In that adjudication exercise, that would have been provided to the adjudication team. And then another database of adjudicated parcels would have been created and handed over back to the Director of Surveys. So they would use the existing common law and RPA registered parcels as the records which would be accessed to basically validate what a member of the public was presenting as ownership and survey information. And once it was deemed adjudicated, then it would be put onto this new land title, registration of titles to land, I think it's called. Yeah, this new system. So the role of the director of the CMIS will continue as it is, if ever that adjudication exercise comes on. And Dr. Edwards referred to the unique parcel identification number. In that land title package, that's the only place in our legislation where a unique parcel reference number is identified as a legitimate identifier of a parcel. Our legislation does not, the Land Surveyors Act does not say anything about it, and I don't believe the registrar has amended any of her legislation to look at a unique parcel identification number as part of her records. I'll have to check to see whether they made those amendments when they were developing their system. So if you go back to the year 2000 when that legislation was prepared, the adjudication package, what they needed was a database of the title information and a database of the survey information so that the adjudication officers can have access to authoritative records to confirm what people were bringing in to say, this is my parcel. So we're almost at that stage, but every time they pick up that exercise, they just think, oh my goodness, this is so expensive. So I know that at the beginning of, well, sometime in October, it did come up in discussion with my office and with regard to Tobago, because the issue of titles in Tobago, I mean, everybody's talking about how difficult it is, but nobody wants to bite the bullet. But I from what I gather, I'm not hearing any discussions that would say that they would definitively propose to implement those pieces of legislation. And I mean, it's 26 years old. There was some amendments in 2018, 2017, or 2018. So I don't know, they will have to start over that discussion. But I mean, it cleaning up our database and connecting to the Registrar General's database is going to do a lot of the work that adjudication exercise was intended to do. Because once you can attach a survey plan and you see that there are several title documents that are describing the same parcel, and then you see that these title documents have 2 chains of title for the same parcel, you can flag it as something that is unusual for, but right now, if we see that the most you can do is flag it, there's no mechanism for us to alert the landowners. That's not in our law. It's just, our job is just recording this information. So the most you can do is if a surveyor comes and you come across this title search, there are 2 sets of ownership chains for the same parcel, you raise it with the owner, let them do the necessary to figure out and clear up their title, because as 2 people gaining ownership of the same piece of land, there must be 2 chains of ownership somewhere, and the description of the parcel was the same. So the surveyor described it in the location, but what happened with the title is something else. But for the adjudication exercise, I have not heard any moves to definitively say it's going to be implemented. But what I can tell you is that the investment is happening in making sure that these databases that exist for the current title systems are being improved, and access to it by the public is going to be, the virtual environment makes it easily accessible. Of course, there's a cost. So the next step, I mean,
the thing about cleaning up the databases is going to throw out a lot of the things that you would probably find with an adjudication exercise. And it's just for the mechanism to correct those things to be put in place. Sorry?
I honestly believe it's not being made, but I don't think it was something that was appreciated by the legal
Uh,
that they like.
there's more money in chaos.
No, that's my honest. It is not being appreciated by years ago. But it's 26 years.
We'll see, because I personally believe that an exercise like that needs to happen with state lands.
Yeah, well, I suppose this would be for both the director of surveys and the developers. Since we are talking about a process that would be kind of driven by the surveys and mapping or surveyors, what is the possibility of incorporating additional information that is not verified or surveyed? Because there is a lot of information, probably some of those old plans where you had a village and you have outlines of surveys that were never identified or anything like that or resurveyed. What is the possibility of incorporating this kind of data into the system, probably with different type of boundaries, or different colored boundary, or different probably a hash boundary, to indicate that there is data already there, there are occupation, there are boundaries that are occupied, but they have not been recently verified. For example, all the LSA data, for example, that where we have outlines of parcels, those could be incorporated in the data set. So it would give us a more complete picture, cadastral picture of boundaries in the country. What's the understanding of doing that, something like that?
So I know that the Commissioner of State Lands is looking to revive her information system. And so she has access to our records and our database. But in her system, she has exactly what you're talking about. She has several tenancy sketches because the site has not been surveyed yet, but she's collecting maybe some sort of tenancy rents from these persons. They are tenancy agreements, but they're not surveyed. And you're right, LSA has a resource where they redefine, I mean, every survey they do is registered by us, right? But in terms of their operational data that they collect, they have their own database. The nice thing about being under one ministry is that the integration of all these land agencies is already recognized as a priority. At the same time that the UN ECLAC did their NSDI assessment in December, the ministry had approached UNDP to look at the what was it called? To look at the digitalization of the Ministry of Land and Legal Affairs and look at the creating a central portal or mechanism where the services of each of its land agencies will be offered to the public. But hidden in that, while they might be only focusing on that portal, you know, the pretty container where you go and you see all the different agencies and you click on it and you can access their records. But underneath that is the need for us to have our integration, because if, let's say, LSA is regularizing
a parcel which is on the schedule to their act and they've defined it by survey, they will see it in our records once it's there. But if, let's say, LSA wants to create the information for the applicants who are applying for certificates of comfort and they have their preliminary surveys or their sketches, they can probably develop something that ties into us, maybe as a separate layer or a separate service that they pull and they drop it onto our database. And of course, those things aren't available yet, but we know it's very easy to do. Once someone thinks that it is important for enough for us to do it. As far as the Director of Surveys asking them for the data so we can put it in our system, I don't have the legislative authority to do that. But I can see that the surveyors having access to that data would be useful, but it's whether those agencies are allowed to allow us to have access to it, or maybe a mechanism of applying, you've been commissioned to do a survey for a particular state agency or entity, and you ask for access to that data and you retrieve it through a central portal would be the ideal situation. But the integration of the data through the NSDI is something that we will work towards, because we know that there is information out there that is useful for the surveyors to know.
Making visible informal data, informal cadastral data.
Yeah.
The appetite of plans and surveys to make visible to the public informal but very legitimate cadastral data.
You're answering?
Yeah.
Well, good.
Okay, two questions really before I contribute. Who is going to be drawing the polygons on this layer? And, well, you said the public. Is it that the surveyors alone should see it, or is everyone should see the data? Anybody?
Anybody can see it, but it will be identified as informal data
Right.
as opposed to the formal
Right.
cadastral plans.
Right. So,
But I mean, I'm looking at, we're saying the idea is that we have 30% coverage, but we know that we have occupation that is way beyond that 30%.
yeah.
And we need to be, at least honest about how much occupation data we do have.
Right. So there are two approaches, and one of those is one of the things that the director is looking towards for phase 2, whereby automatically, as a plan is processed and it reaches the GIS stage, the system is supposed to extract the coordinates from the plan and put a dot on the layer and attach the plan to the dot, so that a survey occurred here, even if there is no parcel. And this is what is happening. In terms of legacy data, the surveys and mapping has already the technology. We were talking about SDI like it's something that the government needs to do. These concepts are already built into the applications within the surveys and mapping. So there is a portal called the GIS portal or the Geo portal that is independent of this application that Colleen is going to show, whereby the GIS unit has the capacity and the training to be able to create any amount of parcels you want, right? And overlay those, right? One of the things I recommend to them do is that don't try to put everything into this one application. This portal allows you to create any amount of applications you want. So you could have an independent purpose-built application just to show these sort of informal parcels, right? And you could turn on, turn off the formal parcels as a backdrop on it, right? So it could be added to the existing system, but turned off, so that people who need it could just check a button and turn it on, or you could have an independent purpose-built application that would allow you to be able to do that, right? The challenge is that, as I said, I don't know if the director has the staff to do that, because they are currently struggling to keep abreast of the number of parcels that are coming through the system now. We're at, Colleen, what's the number now? About 700 or 800 and something plans have been submitted since the new system have been open. And of those, only 10 of them have been able to make it through the GIS onto the map. Because what happens, it comes live onto the map. You don't have to wait. The GIS supervisor is the one who decides when the public sees it, right? So once they reconcile and post, the parcels are immediately there, right? So one of the things that we need to look at is, in terms of throughput, how do we get those parcels to move through the system a lot faster? And at the same time, what sort of resources are going to be available to be able to do the secondary and tertiary type layers that would be required?
So your question spoke about informal parcels. So in my mind, those parcels were not surveyed, they were sketches. That's what I interpreted that you meant. Okay, because right now, if a surveyor comes across a survey plan in the course of their research, or while doing a survey, somebody gives them a copy of something, we always ask that they provide it to us when they're submitting your plan, and we collect them in we have a special book number allocated, and it's called copies of survey plans. Because we can't confirm whether they were attached to any, they may not be attached to a title document, but it's something that people are using as a description of the extent of their parcel. And if that, I don't know if we've put that into the process for digitizing, but it is scanned, it's given a folio number under that book. So that kind of survey plan is already collected. It's just that it's not yet onto our parcel layer. But in terms of informal sketches and those kinds of things, that's a discussion we had with the commissioner, because she has several of her tracts of land that just have tenancy sketches. And we know that that's part of her database that she will need to keep separate from our surveyed parcel data. But we have never made any approaches to her to capture that, because she had her own system being developed. But I understand where you're coming from, because crowdsourcing data is very useful. But I think if it is, we are to consider, so for example, if we want to fast track the adjudication exercise and tell people just give us the information you have for your parcel. I mean, this will probably be the fourth time people will be doing that, because they did it twice for property tax. Now, if you have rented properties, you're doing it again. And you create the mechanism where they upload it to some portal in their geographic location. We'd be building a repository of information that people provide that you can compare to the authoritative data sets to see whether there's a match, or if there's something with the currency, or there's an unregistered agreement for title transfer that's there. But that's a discussion that needs to be had, because it's not something that we've prioritized yet. Yes.
Yeah. I just want to add. Yeah, me.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, so as mentioned, when a surveyor submits a survey plan and they got information from an unregistered plan, we ask them to submit a copy, and we scan it, and we have it in our repository. But the new system, the new CMIS application, will allow for the surveyors to also scan it and attach it to their application when being submitted, so that if you pull up that record, you will see all the corresponding plans and documents that the surveyor would have utilized to conduct that survey. So it will be included in the system one way or the other.
And that's not available to the public. This is only your surveyor's login that you will have access to this. No. So, no, it will, as she says, if it's something that can be put on our parcel layer, it will be as part of the process for recording a survey plan. But if it's attached to a present application, they will attach it as well. But the access to the documents in an application is only available to the login access that surveyors have. It's not going on a separate layer, as we haven't created any separate layer like that. The only thing that I would have asked them to consider is the applications to bring lands under the RPA, because that's not yet a parcel that is titled by anyone. This is part of an application process to be recognized. These extents are being considered for someone to be recognized as the owner. So only when the registrar grants title and we know that there's a CT being prepared, then that parcel will become part of our parcel. Yeah, that will be visible. Yeah, it should. Yeah.
It's going to be advertised at some point in
Yeah.
time, and so the public should be aware that somebody is bringing it under the RPO.
Right. So actually, that is one of the things that has crossed my mind for phase 3, and with the integration of the Registrar General's office, because it's not the standard title to plan kind of thing. It's RPA applications, and in the advertisement where they've posted up that that they declare that this person is whatever the RPA notices. They say the plan is available at our office. If we could provide them with a book and folio or a link or something to the actual plan that's being used in the application process, then the integration becomes, you start to have connections more, so that when they issue the CT, we know that the CT reference for this application process is here. But that's something for phase 3. You're not giving them headaches yet.
Yeah, I mean that should be visible.
Yeah.
Not necessarily only when it is finalized. It should be visible.
Yeah.
From before, as
Yeah.
soon as you have the data.
Yeah.
And even, if somebody overflies, say Laventille, where there's a lot of parcels, and you you have data on where the houses are, and you put a dot on all of those, even that should be visible to
Phase
people.
3.
Well,
Phase 3.
but I want to know about the, as I said, the appetite for people to want to
People
have it
always
visible, not necessarily the resources, because I know you don't have the resources to do
Yeah.
it, but whether you feel it is important to have the information visible
because
to the public.
Yeah, because one of the things for phase 3 is the everyone who's using a drone is collecting imagery, georeferenced imagery, wherever they fly. One of the suggestions for phase 3 was to have persons record either by a point or a polygon, and have your contact information, who your client was, and what data you have for that site. So that the division is just keeping a record of who has what, because it's not data that we collected, which is our aerial imagery. But if you need access to it, and someone is probably going to court and they need to see what this area was presently, which we don't have currency of data, but someone flew a drone, you can contact that person and you can buy the data from them. So it will immediately give us a database that people would be aware where drone activity is happening, who you need to contact, And we're not the ones who are going to be certifying its authenticity or its accuracy. That will be the other surveyor who posted it up. So that's something that I am proposing to have in phase 3. So if you look at that kind of, but it would be surveyors, not anybody flying some video for real estate purposes or an advertisement or anything. It would be quality data that you can use in an application to show some intelligence of measurement. I think we have one more, and I think you have refreshments ready.
Yes, so
One more. But you have people online as well?
I want to know if you could just address them very quickly.
Okay, wait, Liz, let me do Liz. That's the last live person, and then
Yeah.
we'll go to the live people off.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I was just talking in the propagating of the parcel index. We also have a lot of data that is housed by state agencies that have not been submitted to the Surveys and Mapping Division. I don't know how we could work to ensure that we get those, because, for instance, Caroni, for instance, where I was, there's a large repository of surveyed data there that is now in possession of by the Commissioner of State Lands. I don't know where it's stored, how it's stored, but while I was there, we did quite a bit of work in trying to scan those maps and have them properly documented. I can't say what has happened since then. But my question is more about sustainability, because historically, we have done these outreaches, these developments, etc. And we're always hampered by a lack of human resource and, to some extent, the financial resource. And I am wondering, having Dr. Edwards has just identified a limitation of the human resource in the Surveys and Mapping Division, which, while I applaud all the work that you're doing, will just stymie the effort once again. Are we possibly giving consideration to other sources of funding that may allow us even to use external agencies, external resources to help us in maintaining and sustaining this?
So we've proposed for funding to do just that, to advertise for a firm to deal with a chunk of the backlog. So it'll do all the steps, and at the end of it, they will deliver this database of parcels and all its entry information. That's the most that we can do in terms of government-funded interventions. But there is, sorry? Yeah, so partnership of surveyors. Yeah, we would like to approach you all to ask if you would help. But of course, in terms of the monetary reimbursement, that will of course need to go into our budgets as well. So I'm open to ideas. That's why the mechanism of submitting the parcel, your parcel polygon, that is the subject of your survey plan. We don't want your final survey plan. We just want your polygons. And trust me, if we get the identical polygons, we could use that to check your areas and everything. So it would fast track your checking process on your final plan. So I'm open to suggestions. We are always open to any help that we get, because it's not just us personally, it is for everybody that this thing is being built. So let us know. How many questions of?
So there are actually 4 questions/comments in some instances. I think we should add more value to these by, instead of rushing them. So I want to ask everyone who's online if they wouldn't have an issue with getting these concerns addressed after the break. We should be breaking for about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we could address these concerns so that you could give it its proper time. So, 15,
Okay.
20 minutes, let's take a little pause.
As long as they're okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I'm sure these guys need to take a break as well.
Yes.
All right, so what time is it now?
It is 11 o'clock. We could return at Colleen, 11:15 is fine? 11:15.
11:15?
Yes, and we could address all the questions. Thank you.
Okay.
To pop the background.